Welcome to the Intermodal Logistics Podcast. I'm Kevin Baxter, joined by my co-host for this edition, InTek Logistics CEO Rick Lagore. Hey, Rick, how you doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Not too bad. So, not too bad is, we'll have to decide whether we want to say not too bad or lots of things to worry about or nothing to worry about as we talk about the freight market and the overall market, I guess, as we head into close to the second quarter of 2025. Now, one of our early episodes, we did sort of a check-in on the freight market around this time of year, maybe a little bit earlier in 2023. It was fascinating to look back at that and then look back at the one we did last year. And we also had a check-in mixed in there somewhere. There hasn't been a ton of movement from
No, there hasn't been a
now.
ton of movement. It's pretty much been the same story, and the story's really started in July 2022. We'd love to have a different story, and I know all of our competitors and business partners would love to have a different story, but freight just hasn't made a turn. So. Yeah, looking forward to talking a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so basing off that 2023 episode, which we'll put a link in the description if you want to see what we were talking about then. Actually, that one you can only hear, but we have a video version of it too. It's just you can't see our faces in it.
That may be better.
And our 2024 check-in as well, but it's important to kind of keep these going. So basing back off of that 2023 check-in, I had 5 questions then that we sort of worked off of.
Okay.
And I brought the 5 questions back. So I don't think anyone's ever come up with this 5-question format before. So apologies if I'm missing somebody here.
I'm liking the 5 questions. Hopefully I'll keep it short and short and sweet and to the point.
Yeah, I think the Daily Show started that, 20, 30 years ago. Who knows?
There you go.
Anyway, so question number 1, where does the freight market generally stand today in terms of costs, capacity, and volume?
Well, from our perspective and from the stuff that we read and bring in to evaluate our business and the conversation that we have with our customers. And also we just came back from a great conference, the TPM conference put on by Journal of Commerce. Great conference, probably one of the better conferences out there if you really want to know what's going on in the market. And we just came back from that from Long Beach. So basically, the story that we see and then others are seeing in the marketplace are that things are slowing down. We saw some general movement upward in terms of volume and in terms of rates at the end of fourth quarter and the very, very beginning of first quarter this year. But since then, rates have been falling back, and basically volumes have been falling back as well. Interesting, today I read in the National Retail Association, I believe it is.
Federation, right?
Federation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction. Yeah. So they just came out and said that they are bringing down their second quarter import volumes because they're seeing that the retailers are going to bring in less product than was expected initially at the end of fourth quarter, beginning of first quarter this year. So there's things that are coming in play right now that we're starting to see. It's not just anecdotally that we're seeing volumes coming down from particular customers. We're starting to see that across the board.
And a lot of the import volume, I mean, was there some thought that maybe the reason that the volume had ticked up before because of maybe the same reason that it's going to be going down here, that they were anticipating the tariffs and now the tariff stuff is sort of floating around out here. Right. How much is that sort of coming into play?
Well, there's 2 things that came into play here. So shippers were trying to get beyond and plan for what was a potential strike on the East Coast in January,
right?
Which didn't come to fruition, which is great.
Yeah.
And then the other part is that some people were looking at the tariffs and making determination as to what they need to do, and some did pull inventory in sooner, stock their warehouses on the coast, and are just sitting on it. So they can protect themselves against the incoming tariffs in hopes that the incoming tariffs, well, 2 things, that it's short-term in nature, so that it plays to their advantage in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So that pull forward of inventory, we started to see that inventory or purchases were starting to come down, at least from customers and a lot of people that we were talking with in the industry, really at the end of January, early February. Granted, Chinese New Year hits, which is always slower. But we have seen that coming out of Chinese New Year, we have not seen additional volume start to come back. And Chinese New Year actually hit 2 weeks earlier last year than this year. So we would have expected to see some increases. And one of the places that we pay close attention to, and it's near and dear to our heart, is Intermodal. And we would have expected to see Intermodal start to make a rise, or we start to see increases in the second week, or actually I should say in the second half of February. And we actually saw overall volumes being continue to decline against prior year, which we wouldn't have expected. Granted, it's domestic intermodal that we really pay attention to, but domestic intermodal still is tied to what's going on in the ports because of transloads that occur on in the port cities.
Yeah. So this all sort of ties together. Well, let's just go to the next question. It'll all tie together.
Okay.
So, question number 2, how does today compare to this time last year? We sort of hinted around that a little bit already, but tell us where we stand. We keep kind of, looking that year ahead and saying, oh, well, maybe now is the time that we can see that inflection point. You just said we looked like we were getting a little better, and now it's going back the other way. But tell us where we are now versus last year.
So this year versus last year. So rates are falling back similarly to what they did last year. So what we saw, again, going back to intermodal, and we track the intermodal spot rate. And granted, intermodal is more contract than spot, but it does give you a general feel for capacity in the various markets. For example, if you see, say, rates going from LA to Chicago going down, that you understand that that there's more capacity in the LA market that can move to Chicago, so it's a little bit looser. Or if you see it go the other direction, you know that market's tightening up, or that particular lane's taking it. So we look at 115 lanes and we take a look at that. So anyway, in doing so, the indexes last year it hit a low in May of in the third week of May. If you would have looked at the numbers at the end of fourth quarter and beginning of first quarter, they were starting to tick up, and we're saying, okay, that looks great. We're starting to see some at least an underlying volume requirement that's bringing people into the spot market, or just overall contract is increasing. So therefore, the spot rates are going to be coming up in those markets because they have less boxes that they can go ahead and give to sell out. And at this point, it looks like we're going to fall back to the May lows of last year, which was actually the lows of the year, which is something we weren't anticipating, but have since changed our mind. And yes, we feel we'll go back to that cost per mile that we saw.
Well, so that's a good lead into the next question, because talking about anticipating. So you wrote the first sort of preview that you had back in December that's on our blog for the coming year. And at the time, you probably thought you were being kind of conservative anyway.
Yes.
Saying that, maybe the freight market gets a bounce towards the latter part of 2025, maybe as soon as the third quarter, but probably more fourth quarter. But you weren't anticipating it dipping after, the usual sort of seasonal dip. So So now where do you think things are going for the rest of this year? Well,
I'm going to play this off a little bit, because I'm going to play it off as I need to go back to question number 2 a little bit, okay. and I'll play it into the question number 3.
That works.
So what are we seeing different this year versus last year? So this year, what we're seeing is a little bit more indecision from our buyers. We're seeing they're sitting on their hands because they're not real sure what they want to do. The back and forth of what the administration might do in terms of tariffs are keeping people at bay. Should they be investing? Should they not be investing? should we be investing in people, process, technology, or should we be, again, pulling more inventory in and using our cash to do that while we're still trying to figure out what tariffs may be? So there's a lot of back and forth as to what's going on. And even just some of the things that get thrown out there is enough to slow people up for 5 days. I mean, for example, we had a customer that's shipping into Canada. All of a sudden, stuff started going back and forth as to what might happen with tariffs. They stopped. They asked us to push as much as we possibly could in for them in Canada, and then they shut down. Well, the reality is that went back and forth, and it was put on 30-day delay and another 30-day delay. But each time that happened, they still stuck for probably, depending, 3 to 5 days on each occurrence, that they didn't do anything. So the indecision I shouldn't say, a lot of indecision is being held by the business owners and stockholders of companies, or stakeholders, I should say, trying to figure out what they need to do to best position their companies for growth and stability. So that's what's different this year, because at least last year we knew exactly what was pretty much exactly what was happening. This right now it's back and forth, so it's putting some hesitation in people. So that's the different part. So let's go back to question number 3, which is what that we want to address.
What do we expect from the freight market as the year progresses?
Okay, so
for the rest of this year.
So that indecision has what we were expecting, and I think many others were expecting, was we were going to expect that we were going to see freight start to pick up in, say, June time period, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after, but we'll just call it June, plus or minus a few days. And from, well, you'd listen to public calls of different retailers. You listen to the National Federation of Retail, and they're saying that they're pulling back. So we believe that we're going to miss the June upswing, and rates would indicate the same. So therefore, the next logical place that we would start to see freight increase, because of course there's cyclical nature of freight, would be in the fourth quarter, retail driven, or early third quarter as we start, or I should say late third quarter, early fourth quarter as we start restocking for retail. So that's our next best hope. So if that happens, great. But if it doesn't, we're probably looking at May or June of 2026 before we actually see a rise. I mean, there's a couple other things that are playing in the background right now. One of them is housing isn't doing tremendous right now.
Right.
And that's a big, and it punches above its weight in terms of driving freight. And also industrial production is not quite where we'd like it to be in terms of seeing a growth in that area too. Those two key areas are areas that we look at to help determine whether or not we're going to go ahead and actually start to see an uptick. And right now we're not seeing that uptick. And a lot of those are interest rate decisions or interest rate driven. And again, there's indecision as to, are interest rates going to stay the same? Are they going to decrease? Are they going to decrease 3 times this year? Are they going to decrease 7 times? Nobody knows at this point.
Yeah. We already got past a Fed meeting that, initially probably a few months back we thought was going to have a rate cut, and now the Fed is definitely in that sort of indecision, like wait and see approach a little bit more than they were before. So without the rate cuts, then there's sort of that trickle of different potential effects of not as much spending on home building, other things that you've mentioned in pieces before as well. Yeah,
I mean, consumers are getting a little bit concerned, and so they're holding back as well in terms of what they want to buy. Which, not to say that we don't buy too much already, so maybe it's a good thing that we're slowing up in terms of our purchases. But in any case, there's a lot of things that seem to indicate slowing down, and it's more, I think, around indecision as to how to progress forward in a positive way. We were running pretty well. But at this point, it's just let's try to figure out what's going on, and then let's readjust our strategy to the current circumstances.
Well, what's interesting is in general, it seemed like the economy was hanging in there over the last couple of years. Freight still wasn't really getting going.
No, it was not
during that point. So, is there anything that could indicate, some of these changes could lead to some jump starting? Is there something that maybe, an X factor here that may not have been there last year or the year before?
There could be. I mean, this is not something that we've seen in my lifetime anyway. And I've been doing this freight thing for 35 years now. Actually, now that I talk about it, it's 36. How time flies. But we have not seen this back and forth on tariffs and on just general administration type things at the federal level that has caused people to do what they're doing right now, which is let's just sit back and see what's going on and evaluate the situation. So that X factor, not real sure. I mean, maybe we will produce a ton more stuff in here in the United States, but it's going to take some time for that to happen. You just don't open up a new auto plant. And I started my career in the auto industry, working for GM for 6 years, and working very close with the superintendents there. Yeah, it's even tough to get a line started up super quick. So that whole process, what that turns into, that who knows? I mean, we're looking back and forth, and even just this morning, I mean, the European community went ahead and said, well, we're going to go ahead and put a tariff on X, Y, and Z. I don't know exactly which ones, but they said we're going to put 25%. And so I don't want to mislead anybody on which ones, but but they said, but then
it might change by the time this is published.
It could very well do that. And so then we came back, we as the administration came back and said, well, we'll put 200% on alcohol coming in the United States. So I don't know well, I'm not a drinker of champagne, but I'm just grabbing a commodity. If all of a sudden champagne goes up 200%, I believe that people will not buy champagne. No. So does that turn into, well, champagne buyers are going to be beer drinkers? Well, beer drinking is produced here in the United States. So is that going to go ahead and drive people to drinking more champagne than beer? I don't know. It's a big difference between champagne and beer. They're not the same commodities. But
there's a champagne of beers, I believe.
There you go. Yes. Absolutely. There's a few of them. And in any case, you don't know what some of these factors are because we have not gone through this type of situation before. So there could be some very positive things that happen in the really near term. But a lot of the things that Wall Street's talking about it's going to be longer term, and even the administration is saying we need to stop looking at quarter to quarter performance, and we need to be looking at, much like the Chinese, over 100 years, and make your strategic moves off of 100-year type thinking. So it's, again, not real sure what's going to happen, and there can be some super positive things, but there could be some super negative. Who knows?
One thing that definitely influences spending in terms of the consumer level is inflation. That was one number that was actually a little better this past week than maybe some people were anticipating. So. Yeah,
and that gives the Federal Reserve some coverage or to be able to come in and reduce rates. But yeah, the last two readings, the CPI and the PPI came back, and they came back lighter than what was anticipated. Which is a good thing. So we'll just have to see what the Federal Reserve. My general feeling is that they're going to sit on their hands on the next meeting because it's just too soon to know all the back and forth that's going on today. Mm-hmm. To say yes, we're going to go ahead and cut rates, because if they go do that, there's a couple things there. Yes, we'd love to see the rates cut, but it's also the message that's being sent when you do cut the rates, because they could cut the rates and the message could be sent that things are not as good as what we originally thought they were going to be for 2025. So cutting the rates for that reason versus we're just trying to manage a soft landing, those are two different stories.
Yeah. And
so based off of that, it really depends why they would be cutting it. So again, that's why I would think they would probably sit on their hands at least this time around, because they don't want to send a panic in the marketplace.
So we'll move on to the next one. You mentioned intermodal is more contract, but spot rates have been a big indicator all along. So, and we're already a little bit past the time of year, the old traditional, like getting your contracts settled in and everything like that. But for those shippers who are kind of deciding at this point, is it wise to keep looking at the spot rates and keep kind of playing that game, or is a contract situation now starting to look a little bit more appealing to protect against, potential rates going up, or are they going to go down some more?
Again, that's a great question, and we'll put our spin on it and see where it lands. But before I get into that a little bit deeper, I just want to back up a little bit. A lot of folks ask us, why do you pay so much attention to the intermodal spot rates? That's such a smaller piece of the market than the truckload rates are. And that's so true. And again, spot rates, intermodal tends not to be a spot rate type business. But we pay close attention to it, and we have since 2010. So we've got 15 years of data that we've been watching, and that's kind of my thing. I really like numbers. It's always been a thing for me. And
it's not a small sample size now.
No, it's not a small sample size. And so we've got 15 years of data, and what we've been able to pull from that is that, yes, truckload does drive the market. Of course it does. And yes, truckload market rates do go up before intermodal rates do go up. But what we've been able to identify in this information over the last 15 years is that, yes, while truckload rates are going up, intermodal is used by large shippers that are using intermodal as capacity tightens as a method to go ahead and bring in cheaper capacity for their 53-foot needs. And then the small to medium-sized players in the market, yes, there are a number of them that use intermodal today, but the ones that don't, they go ahead when they have trouble trying to find a truckload capacity. They say, well, you know what? We've never really used intermodal, or, we've used intermodal in the past to fill in some capacity requirements. So when the truckload market, when the rates start to come up and it's sustainable, you will start to see the intermodal spot rates start to climb up as well. And so when at the end of fourth quarter and the beginning of first quarter, yes, intermodal truck rates were going up. But if you take a look at the intermodal spot rates, they were not. Mm-hmm. They were very steady. And as a matter of fact, they started to go down. And so therefore, we knew, based off of what we've seen before, that you're going to have to squint to actually see that there's a full recovery. And this is the end of the freight recession. Mm-hmm. Because we saw that there's not an overall need that's driving more 53-foot capacity needs, which is then going to drive up the intermodal pricing. So again, just want to back off and give some background to that, because it gives some context, because so many people say, well, why do you look at it so much? It does have some really good baseline data that helps you understand what's going on in the overall 53-foot capacity market. So that's that piece. What shippers should do? Holy cow. Great question. So getting to, this is question number 5, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's sort of a combined question, right. 4 and 5. So we were talking about when to jump into contracts versus continuing on the spot thing. And then question 5 was what else should shippers do now? And what should they maybe wait to do? Right. I guess both of them are sort of related questions.
Kind of a related question. Yes. So we'll call it a combination 4 or 5.
Yeah. So,
it's really tough to tell people what to do. And we really don't want to be in that position, because if we actually did know that, again, we'd go buy ourselves a lottery ticket. We'd be in the stock market and we'd make a whole bunch of money, because we'd be able to figure that out, because we knew exactly what was going on. But from a shipper's perspective, our opinion is, and what we're telling our shippers to do is, we are still hopeful that we're going to see the fourth quarter, and we're going to start seeing some volume recovery in the fourth quarter. That ship has not sailed yet. So if I were a shipper and I wanted to balance the needs of our business, our customers, and also the financial people that want to make sure that we're making money at what we're doing, I would start locking in some rates and some capacity for it's not going to be wildly crazy. And typically, and the reason I say that it won't be wildly crazy is because the first sign of a recovery in a freight market, you start to see some pickup, but you really don't see the pickup in a more wild volume type crazy until you hit the next part of the cyclical side of freight. Mm-hmm. So then you would start to say, well, if we start to see volume pick up, then you'd really start to see things get a little bit more wild in late first quarter, early second quarter of next year. But with that said, I would plan and have at least some contracts in place for your rates that you have now. Still probably playing a portion of our business or your business to the spot market, and then just continue to evaluate really over the next 45 days. March and April will tell us a ton as to what's going on. It'll tell us a ton to say, hey, Rick was way wrong on we're going to miss the June uptick in volume. Mm-hmm. But it could confirm that, like what I'm saying and what others are saying in the market, that we're going to miss the June time period. So it's just a tough place to be right now because we're waiting for that recovery. And I know that shippers are trying to figure out what's going on as well. But I would definitely have some pieces of my business in the truckload locked in. I'd have some pieces of my business on the intermodal locked in. But then I would also be playing the spot market to an extent. And what level, that's really a decision that individuals have to make as terms of what percentage they want to play the spot market for now.
Yeah. So outside of the contract versus spot piece, you've already mentioned that you're seeing a lot of pauses in terms of decision making. Is there any other piece of advice you would give in terms of making decisions for, every business is different, obviously. Some have more dealing with the import-export side of things than others. So, but is there any other advice you would give to a BCO out there right now that as they look ahead for the next several months?
Look at some technology. It's amazing some of the technology that's coming out, and I'll come back to another conference that we had earlier this year, which was the Manifest conference, which is an up and coming. Well, it used to be an up and coming. Now it is a real conference,
there, yeah.
And it's there with a lot of people and a lot of people bringing in technology. You know, when things are a little bit slower in nature, that's the best time to bring in and test new technology. You don't want to test technology when you're out there and burn the candle on both ends. That's a recipe for disaster. But there's a lot of technology that's out there that would really help shippers communicate with their customers, communicate internally, communicate with their suppliers, their freight suppliers. It's just absolutely crazy. And some of this AI technology is up until, I would say, probably in the last 6 to 9 months, you're still going to need an API connection to be able to work into the systems. But there's technology on the AI side with the agents that they act human-like, meaning that they can actually take from a screen and put to a screen versus having to try to develop API connections for all your portals, for example, that you need to put delivery appointments in for your customers that you're delivering to. And you could have hundreds of portals that you need to be putting. Everybody has their own portal. So there's on the technology side, this would be a good time to go put some technology and try some of that stuff. So that would be one suggestion. The other suggestion is constantly be looking out to the market to see what's going on. Because on the freight side, yes, your business is competing with, of course, if you're selling, say, paper towels, your business is competing with other paper towel providers. But on the transportation, when you're in the logistics side, you're not competing. To an extent, you are, because you're trying to drive the lowest price and the best service to your customers, and you want to be first on the shelves. But you're competing with those all the shippers that are in your market, and for that capacity and that price. So I pay attention to what's happening in the market, but pay particular attention to what's happening in your own market, because when things change, they will change quickly. Yeah. And you're going to be competing against everybody else that's in your area. And those areas are getting tighter and tighter and tighter as in terms of capacity when things actually take off, because of so many distribution centers are so focused on various areas of the country or particular cities. So that would be another thought to take a look at.
And we'll be continuing to keep close tabs on things. You mentioned the Intermodal Spot Rate Index that's updated weekly on the InTek Logistics blog. We post about we do some of our own content and also post others' content about how the market's moving on our social media, on the InTek Logistics, LinkedIn, X/Twitter, if you, whatever you want to call it these days. You can find a lot out there about where things are going by following our channels, and of course, where you get this podcast. We will probably keep talking about this a little bit too, depending on who our guests are on a given episode. And you can find that on our YouTube channel, the Intermodal Logistics channel, also on all the major podcast platforms, which if you're listening to this or seeing this, you already know. But we do appreciate it. And please do subscribe and follow us wherever you do get this podcast. Drop us a comment, a review. We appreciate all that. You can also email us at podcast@inteklogistics.com for the more detailed questions that you want to maybe take less publicly. And visit the website, www.inteklogistics.com, for more about the company. Rick, thanks for getting through those 5 questions. I think there were probably a few more than 5 in there. There were some follow-ups, but 5 was the basis.
There we go.
So,
that worked for me.
We'll be back with another episode soon. So thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.